The Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, Conda, power. I love the power. I love the power.
G'day everyone, Macca 19 here, and this is the Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast coming to you live on Port Fan Radio. As usual, we've got Portia as co-host. How are we?
Oh, really good, Macca. Look, I just wanted to say, I was lucky enough to be at the ground game of the week.
Yep.
So some controversial umpiring decisions. You know, team took the lead early, controlled the game most of the day with a bit of a switch and scoring momentum in the third quarter. At the end of the day, the better team came out on top with a winning margin just under 4 goals. And the most important thing I think I took out of that was it was a changing of the guard with an up-and-coming coach taking down a premiership coach. And, it was a hell of a game on Sunday. But in the end, Carlton took home the points over Breezy's Demons. And it was just one of the most thrilling experiences of my life to go see that game. On Friday night, it was pretty good too.
Good call.
I'm assuming you guys saw that one.
I love it. That's a great intro. That is the best intro we've ever had, I'm going to say.
Excellent.
And look, back on the podcast is bomberclifford.
G'day.
Welcome.
So,
very underwhelming intro by Bomber there.
Yeah, what was that all about?
Well, it's hard to follow up with something like that.
Very true. Very true.
I did pour myself a glass of wine while Portia was doing her intro.
Yes, we did hear that.
I think I need to catch up.
I was too busy listening to my own voice, so I didn't actually hear that.
That's it. Well, what a weekend for Port Adelaide. It was a great one.
Amazing. Fantastic. Loved it.
Well, let's get straight into our love and our hate, which is one thing we loved, one thing we hated about Port Adelaide this week. Bomber, I'll start with you, mate. What was your love?
What I loved, I actually loved watching that game, and this is before knowing we'd won. It was, I went in, I had the wife and the kids were gone for the night. I had the TV to myself. I had ample booze to keep me through the night. I had a laptop charged up, and it was just, I don't know, it was maybe the expectation had lifted off my shoulders as a supporter as much as it has the team. And it was just sitting down and watching a game of footy, and I actually had fun. Like, it's the first time this year I think I've enjoyed a game of football as a supporter and sitting there and watching it. So that's my love.
That's a good love. I like that love.
My hate. Do we want my hate now or go through everyone's love first?
We'll do everyone's love first, I reckon. Portia, What was yours?
I got 2. One was, first of all, I just want to talk about how much I hate Hawthorn supporters. They're always really obnoxious. Like, the most annoying, and they're not obnoxious in like a normal football way. They're obnoxious in like an internet nerd way. In that you can sit next to Hawthorn supporters for like 3/4 of the game, and they'll just be making snarky remarks about everyone on the field. But then as soon as they get in front, then you'll suddenly realise they're Hawthorn supporters rather than just assholes. This game was kind of different to that in that they didn't really have much of a sniff for most of the game, and then they got kind of cranked in the last quarter. So it was really nice to be at one of those games and just really enjoy that. But I think the other one, look, really, I know we had a lot of good performers. It was really great, but just Chad Wingard sticking it up on was just a fantastic thing for this weekend. To get messed around by Luke Hodge, the absolute thug, and just come back and just keep kicking goals. I mean, there's no better way to say that you do not matter. Like Hawthorn, Luke Hodge particularly, I've described it in the past as West Adelaide bullshit, where you go the man, but you actually lose the game because you weren't actually playing football. And I think that's kind of what Hawthorn were doing. Certainly that's what Luke Hodge was doing. He didn't do much. And Chad Wingard just, he won the day because he won the contest, and, he's not suspended for 2 games, is he? So, no, really good. Really like Chad Wingard this week.
Awesome. I love it. And go easy on Hawthorn supporters. According to their scarves, they've only been members for 3 years, so they're still learning the game.
That's the thing, Macca. That's the thing. Like, there's like 20-year-old Hawthorn fans that started barracking in 2008, and they think they've been through the tough times in a year they haven't won a premiership. Like, you just want to strangle that guy, pretty much.
Yes, absolutely. Mine's a bit boring. Mine was the way that we dominated them in the midfield. we just seemed to walk it out of the centre bounces time and time again. Ryder's ruck work was incredible, and it was one of the best ruck games by a Port player in the last few years, I reckon. He just continually fed our midfielders. We killed them in terms of wanting and hunting the ball as well. We didn't give them an inch all night, didn't allow them to get any sort of outside run going. It was pretty much our most accomplished performance of the season.
Totally agree. It was really great, and it was against a good side too, which is the nice part. But Ryder's dominance, I think we predicted in the preview that he was going to be in a winning position, and the main thing we'd take out of it was just what his relationship was like with the Port midfielders. Well, there's the good news. The good news is the relationship between our ruck when he's winning and our midfielders is actually pretty bloody good. So it's fantastic to see. We want to see more of that. We want us to go back to the days of Lade Burgoyne, where you go in for a ruck contest and we're actually trying to lock up the ball so we can get that sort of set play magnificence into effect. And so if we can get that with Ryder, then I am absolutely thrilled, probably for the first time since we've traded for ruck. So it'd be really great, yeah.
Some of those taps he did were just sublime. The little back taps.
Oh my god, that's the one. That's the one I wanted to see. Look, I haven't been seeing that really, not effectively, but you saw the little behind the back tap, and that was really, that was like, yes, we are definitely at that point when it came up. I think it came around about the third quarter. That was the point to go. Yeah, no, we are definitely winning in ruck, aren't we? To getting off those ones, it was really good.
Well, look, I was a bit boozy on Friday night as well. I had a lovely bottle of Pinot from Central Otago in New Zealand, and
nice.
I've got to say I was very, very close to changing my username to Ryder to Grey for a while there. It almost happened. Then I thought about it. I thought, no, don't make drunk decisions on big footy. That's what you don't do. But
if you don't pretend you're 19, then what are you?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So, Bomber, your hate for this week.
My hate. It has to be the absolute jizz fest by the Channel 7 commentators over Hawthorn and in particular Cyril whenever Cyril went near the ball. And I couldn't think of a more, in recent memory, a more uninspiring performance by someone who was being... it was just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Like every time he went near the ball, it was as if they were willing him to take on the game. And he took a couple of good marks, but he was doing it by running off his man and finding a little hole in the defence. He wasn't really doing anything special, and they hardly commented about people like Sam Gray or Wingard, and I found that infuriating.
Look, I think that what you're seeing there is pretty much what you see anytime you see parents barracking for their kid at a school game, which is that, as long as they're not picking their nose, they think it's amazing. So that's really the sort of attitude I think they have towards Cyril Rioli at this point at the Channel 7 commentary team is just, as long as he seems to be doing something, then it's amazing, it's fantastic. And obviously guys like Wingard actually have to earn their stripes, which it's probably unfair, but would we really have it any other way? I'd much rather be the team that has to work for what they get.
Yeah, absolutely. Portia, your hate?
That's a really good question. I think the only hate I have is that I had an overcooked sausage roll at half-time. But apart from that, I really loved the game. It was just really great. Yeah,
it's never good.
Yeah, it's good. Oh, no, sorry. Archie's handball. That's the one. Yeah.
Archie's handball. Yep.
Oh, God.
Well, you've just stolen my hate, because that's my hate as well. It was Monfrey's calling for that handball by Archie in the last quarter. Then looking at him like, what the hell are you doing giving me the ball? It's like, well, you called for it, Gus. That's why he gave you the handball.
I'll stick up for Gus here. I reckon it was still on. It was a good play. He just handballed it too high.
Yeah,
it was a big looping high handball that sort of affected the time that Gus had.
Yeah, but if Gus wasn't sprinting towards goal, then he would have been able to give him more of a bullet handball.
Yeah.
So it's kind of 50-50 on that one, I reckon. But in the end, you're a senior player. Don't call for that handball that was never, ever on. And I'm really happy that Arch got his moment to seal the game a couple of minutes later to make up for it.
Yeah, look, it was really nice he got the chance to fix it up. It's sort of reminiscent of when, Stewie G had that horrendous kick-in against Brisbane back in the day when then he won the Rising Star nomination the week after against the Dogs. I think it's pretty much like that, except he got to do it within the space of about 5 minutes. So it was really good to see. And I'm not going to blame Gus for calling for it because, if you're a small forward, you just want to get every ball you possibly can. But I think that obviously Archie learned a lot from that within 5 minutes, which is really impressive. And I don't think he'll be doing that sort of dumb shit again. So I think we'll be all right.
No, that's
and we won the game, so who cares?
Exactly. Well, let's go straight into our review. It was Port versus Hawthorn on Friday night in front of a pretty poor crowd of 28,000 at Empty Head. And, we came away with a wonderful 22-point victory. It was double trouble, really, with the two Greys dominating throughout the match. We won 16 goals 12 to 13 goals 8. Wingard was dominant up forward again with 4 goals. Gus and Schultze kicked 3 and Needy slotted 2. Portia, you were there. Do you want to give us a quick rundown on what happened?
Look, it was, I think that in the week beforehand, so last week, we saw Clarko come out and say, we don't need to finish top 2 to make the grand final and be a premiership winner. And I kind of feel like the players were listening to that. Hawthorn have had the success they've had, and it's similar to the way that Port Adelaide played back in 2004 and I suppose before then, in that they've had the success they've had because they've managed to develop a very efficient game plan, which means that they can still win without exerting themselves to the extent that their opponents tend to have to, because they have the key players and they have the systems and they have the setup. And that's certainly something that Port Adelaide should be aspiring to re-achieve, is that ability to just sort of almost effortlessly win games. And it was really clear from the outset, I feel, that Hawthorn were just trying to do just enough to win, as they've probably done most of the season, but that Port Adelaide were just pushing them enough. They were just scary enough to make them accountable, and they didn't really like that. And so they were forced into a position where I feel they had to choose between really taking on the game and trying to win, or just sort of trying to see how close they can get to winning and try and snag it if they can. I think they took the second option and it didn't pay off for them. But I think we played extremely well. I was a little bit disappointed at the game with I suppose from the second half of the second quarter onwards, where we sort of stopped leading up the ground so much. So what I mean there is that when a guy's on half-back and he's looking for someone to kick to, ideally you want multiple options, making a small lead, like it might be a sideways lead or a forward lead or whatever else, but at least giving options to the person with the ball. And we stopped doing that at about the 20-minute mark of the second quarter. We sort of started doing a bit after that, and we kind of won anyway, but I feel that was really where we let ourselves down, and it's sort of where Hawthorn came back in the third quarter. But look, we were just good enough, and we were willing to work harder than Hawthorn on the day, and we had just that little bit of excellence, particularly in the form of Wingard, I felt, that really just got us over the line. And Robbie Gray obviously had a fantastic game as well. But no, I think it was a really interesting game. I think we were well prepared for it by the game against GWS the week before, where we had quite a physical game, because it meant that when Hawthorn started trying on, we'd actually already had a previous experience of that quite recently, so we were prepared for it and ready to work through it. So that was really great to see. I hope we can hold on to that for the next 2 games. But it was a very exciting game and very fun to watch.
Indeed. I think that comment by Clarkson's pretty interesting, that you don't need to finish top 2 to win the flag. And I guess in theory he's right, but it's only really happened once in the last 10 years, which was Sydney in 2012. And in the end, I think what you don't want to do is give your opposition, finals rivals, a bit of a blueprint on how to beat you. And I think that's possibly what they've done this weekend. If they haven't been going 100%, then they could have really shot themselves in the foot, because we've pretty much followed the Richmond blueprint of how to beat them a couple of weeks ago, and it worked. So what you don't want to do, and what we've sort of been victim of in previous seasons, is maybe taking things a bit too lightly heading into the finals, and sometimes you can find it a little bit difficult to go up that extra gear when you need to.
And I think that also Clarkson's comment was uninformed by the actual ladder. So if you're talking about, can we win in Sydney or can we win in Adelaide? Yeah, sure. But right now it's looking like if you're Hawthorn, you're going to have to win either the first week in finals in Perth or the prelim final in Perth, and you can pick one of those. So it's not an easy task. Adelaide's probably got the least travel to get to Perth, but from Melbourne it's still a bloody long way. It affects your players, undoubtedly. Even Mick Malthouse, back when he was the West Coast coach, admitted that, although he quickly forgot as soon as he started coaching Collingwood. it does take something out of you, and it is hard to change. Get your jet lag and whatever else that comes along the way. So I think that is an underestimation by Clark's of what is actually required. But if he's going to be a bit arrogant, I mean, if anyone in the league is going to be a bit arrogant, it should be the Hawthorn coach, because they really have had a pretty shit hot last 5 years or so, realistically, or 7 years, I suppose it works out to. Yeah. And you can't blame them for being like, we can win anywhere, anytime. I'd love for Port Adelaide to get that attitude back, and I think that we have to a certain extent. We certainly showed that last week. So this, I'm not going to bag Clarkson too much for saying what he said.
Yeah, look, the thing that probably impressed me the most was how we controlled the game. We really dictated the pace of the game from the first minute. We didn't really allow them to take control for any serious amount of time, maybe sort of 5 minutes here or there. There's only really sort of one or two other occasions this year where we've actually done that. So it was a pretty welcome change, I thought. And for me, the best part was how at three-quarter time, we're up by a point. I figured, Hawthorn might sort of run over the top of us and, win by 2 or 3 goals. But it didn't happen. We ended up coming out and kicked 3 goals too before they had a scoring shot in the last to really ice the game. And I thought that was super important. And it showed sort of some good sort of mental attitude towards the game in the last quarter.
Who's our defensive coach right now, do you think? Who's our defensive coach? Because our defence the last 2 weeks has been absolutely astonishingly fantastic, and they've had to play different roles each time.
It's Nick's, isn't
it? Yeah. No wonder they're talking about him being a potential senior coach, because it's just been, certainly the last 2 weeks, it's been really evident just how much our defence has gelled with, Trengo and Carlisle out this week, no doubt. That's really amazing how well they work as a team together. It's interesting, I think I read an article on Jonas earlier today talking about how he's found it tough when people up in the field haven't necessarily been doing what they were doing, with what they were supposed to do, which I think is something that I've certainly perceived as being a problem in the past. And now that up the field is better than it was certainly mid-season. And I think that obviously Jonas is performing better, O'Shea's performing. The fact that we're getting better performance out of our midfield and our half-forwards has really improved our ability for our defence to actually be a complete lockdown and shut-down defence, and that's obviously, defence wins premierships in pretty much every sport and pretty much every league. So I think that gives us a really strong footing to go into next year, and it's just been really satisfying to see how well we've done without our 2 best key defenders.
I like the way we got under their skin. There was a couple of plays where I think it was Gus Monfries with Hodge and even against Sean Burgoyne. There was obviously niggle throughout the game, and you could see. You mentioned earlier, Portia, about how Hawks, all through the year, they've controlled the tempo of a game. And I remember watching them play Adelaide, and they were toying with them. You could see that they might have been just behind or just in front, and the Adelaide players were going flat out, but the Hawks players just had control of the game. I didn't see that on Friday night at all. I think that at no point did they ever feel like they were in control of the game. There was They got a couple of easy goals where they did the U-turn from the wing round behind, round through their defensive area, and then down the other wing without us touching the ball. And that was, I started to see those happen and think, oh shit, here we go, we've lost this. But I think that we had them rattled, and I think there was quite a bit of mind games going on out there on the field.
Yeah, no doubt. But also, we had a different to play for than they did. Hawthorn, they're going to be top 4, realistically. They're just going to be top 4. And it's going to be hard for them to get in the top 2. They've got the percentage to hold up anyone that gets on equal number of games to them. So they weren't playing for much, but what we were playing for, we didn't have any pressure on us. We were just playing to go out there and do the best we could on a Friday night with some guys that were getting into good form. And, I think that we certainly had a few things on our side. It's obvious that any team performs better when there's a bit less pressure on them. And Hawthorn, they certainly could have in the past exerted more pressure than they did on Friday night.
Onto some player reviews, and as I said, it was a bit of double trouble. The Gray brothers, or brothers from other mothers, dominated. And we might as well start with Sammy Gray, because his was just a fantastic breakthrough performance. And
amazing stuff.
It was wonderful, and I said in the preview that it wouldn't surprise me if he was able to get off the leash a bit against the Hawks, as it was doubtful that the guys like Lewis and Mitchell and Hodge would bother sort of giving him any sort of defensive attention at all, and that's kind of what happened. I really couldn't tell who was his opponent on the weekend, and he just seemed to run around like a bit of a lost puppy all night, which was wonderful.
Yeah, I think you're dead on there, Macca, and it's certainly something we did discuss in the preview. Your memory is correct. That at the end of the day, when you're making match-up decisions, you're deciding who you're going to let run loose. And they made a mistake. They let Sam Gray run loose, and he punished the hell out of them. It was really fantastic to see. It was the first time I've really seen Sam Gray play a quality game, because I don't watch Magpies games, so this is the first time I've seen the Sam Gray that other people have talked about in the past, and it was really great to see. I don't know if he can perform like that every week. Certainly, if he gets a bit of attention in the next couple of weeks, which I imagine Gold Coast will probably pay a bit of attention, then maybe we might see a bit of a difference. But certainly, it's good to see that when he is left to be the loose, I don't know about loose, but the extra man, that he can be very damaging. And so that's good, because it makes it a harder decision for the opposition coach to make as to matchups. And so that's really great. It was really good to see that he could get in there and have a bit of a good game for himself, and certainly in a timely fashion, because I know that I wouldn't be the only person that had him on my list of people to just say, let's move on and try something else.
I thought he was really good and really quick, quick with his decisions as well. When he was coming out of a pack, he knew it's like his instinct kicked in. There was games where I've seen him earlier this year where he's in the forward lines, he was overthinking what he had to do. Whereas seeing him in the midfield, it was more a case of he was running on his instinct. He'd get the ball and get it out quick.
I think that one thing that I really, now that you mention it, I think I've really noticed about the Friday night game, and certainly watching it, all the people setting up down the field, is how similar, it's going to sound weird, but how similar it was to an SANFL style game, where there's sort of a lot of free space along the wings to move and get the ball forward and back. And I think that might have helped Sam Gray out, and certainly in terms of being familiar with how the game is played. Like Hawthorn has been said, they didn't play ultra defensive, they played fairly attacking, and I think that's pretty much a standard in the SANFL as well. Obviously in that style of game plan, he's used to it. He's probably obviously had a very good performance. It would be good to see how he performs against, I suppose, a more shut down side. But that's probably something for next year. We won't be likely to see it again this year unless it's Fremantle, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's right. 34 touches at 70%. He had 10 score involvement, so he had a play in about 40% of our scores. It shows his work rate. He was doing the tough stuff as well. A few tackles, 6 inside 50s, kicked a goal. Fair play to Sammy. I mean, through the month of August, he's gone from pretty much 100% locked into list to maybe getting another year on the rookie list to quite possibly getting upgraded to the senior list for 2016. And as we've said, he looked fantastic in his natural position. And, that sort of second string midfielder with pace and tenacity and good defensive pressure and, clearance winning ability is exactly what we need.
I liked Ken's comments about him in the after-match presser too, where he was talking about the one club system and Sam coming through that. I thought that was a nice little touch.
It would certainly be... this would be the first time we've had a Port Magpies player... Well, actually, that's not true. At the same time, we've had Brendan Archie and Sam Gray as Port Magpies raised players coming through and actually being a reasonable AFL force, which I think is the first time, since our entry to the AFL, pretty much, isn't it? So that's really good to see, and I guess it does exactly speak of the strength of one club, the fact that we do have some sort of control over what happens with our players at SANFL level. Where previously, obviously, the Magpies was a bit of a desolate wasteland in the past, prior to one club, in terms of providing players for the power. It was not really all that great at all.
There was Brett Ebert and Poltz.
Poltz, yeah.
I think you just proved the argument.
Well, look, if we're saying Sammy Gray is now a force after a couple of good games, I mean, Poltz almost played in a premiership and played 90-odd games, so he's worth mentioning, I think.
Yeah, all right. Look, I mean, Poltz is not...
Well, he's better than Justin Hoskin, for God's sake. And Kane Ackland.
What about, what was it, Brennan? Brennan? Oh, what's his name? Was it Brennan?
Steve Brosnan.
Brosnan, that's the one. Steve Brosnan, thank you. Yeah, Steve Brosnan. That didn't really work out too great. And there was another... Sheehan? Was it Sheehan? Anthony Sheehan?
Anthony Sheehan, yep.
Yeah, and there's a couple others that just sort of it didn't really go anywhere, and it didn't look like it was going to be going anywhere. Everyone that was good at Magpies was getting drafted by Victorian clubs, but it's I suppose what you really can say about Sam Gray and Brendan Archie is that it's really been development that's brought them through, and that's more useful to us as the power than just having a good under-18s player, because a good under-18s player everyone's watching, but a good SANFL player that comes on under our tuition, that's valuable to Port Adelaide specifically. So that's what's, I suppose, most pleasing about the recent developments with Brendan Archie and Sam Gray.
And his brother or cousin or whatever you want to call him, Robbie Gray, he absolutely killed them as well. He also had 34 touches. He had 7 clearances, 7 inside 50s. His ability to read Ryder's tap work was just beautiful to watch. And had he kicked those 2 first quarter goals, it pretty much would have been the perfect midfielder's game. Pretty much.
He had a fantastic performance. I think we have seen him play better, but he was still extremely good this week. There's no doubt. If like you said, if he finished off those 2, then it would have been one of the best games he's had, but he didn't, so he has played better. But it's really amazing how much he's come on in the last few years and just become a really top-rate contributor for Port Adelaide. I think that if you looked at it, like we dreamed of it probably 6 years ago, we probably would have thought, that'd be really nice if that happened, but I don't think we really necessarily expected it to happen. But the fact that it has, he's got through his injury worries and he's playing, full seasons pretty much. And at this sort of level, it's just been really fantastic to see.
And consistent too, consistently at that high level.
Exactly. It's the consistency that's really important with the high level performance. I noticed that there's been some arguments on the board about Cameron O'Shea not providing that consistency. And that's certainly a fair argument.
I did like there was a couple of times when Robbie would get the ball on Friday night, and it's as if he's one of those players where it's like everybody else stops. He gets the ball and everybody goes into slow motion, and he seems to be able to read the gaps. And there was a point where he ran between 3 players. One of them was a Port player and there was 2 Hawks players, and he pretty much just changed direction and ran through this gap. I don't know how he got through it. We ended up getting a goal out of it. But it was just, I think someone put a GIF up on the forum with it in, and it just is sublime to watch. He reads the ball, he gathers, sees the gap, runs between 2 people, and I think he handballs off to Archie. But sublime player.
I think with Robbie Gray, you're absolutely right. It seems like everything slows down and he gets the possession. I think with Chad Wingard, usually what happens for me is that I go, what happened there? And I have to think about it. I have to wait for my brain to catch up with what's actually happened. It's a very different phenomenon. But certainly with Robbie Gray, he's good at seeing the thing that no one else is doing and having enough time to execute correctly. It's really good.
He's the modern day Robert Harvey in terms of his just instinctive sidestep, his zip almost. I don't even know how to describe it. Just his sudden, immediate change of direction. Where if I tried to do that, I would fall over or break a knee or do something. I don't know what I'd do. But I don't know how he can do it, but it's just amazing how he does it. And it's not like he does it once every 4 weeks or once every season. He does it 5, 6, 7 times every week. It's incredible.
I think the difference between Robbie Gray and Robert Harvey is the fact that Robert Harvey could be swung around 360 degrees twice and still not get a free kick against him for holding the ball, whereas Robbie Gray actually displays of it occasionally.
Yeah, that's it. Well, moving on, and look, I think we had fingers crossed that Brendan Archie could back up his breakout effort against GWS, and you've got to say against a Hawthorn outfit, I didn't think he could do it. I thought he might drop back a little bit, but what a game he played as well. And 25 touches, 6 tackles, a goal assist, 4 inside 50s. Yeah, he had just a wonderful game. Yeah,
he's good. Lock him in. Upgrade him to number 11, which I proposed on the board, which got thanks. So, we'll see. I think that, it's great that he backed it up. But that's the way Port Adelaide fans are. We're going to demand he does it for the next 2 weeks as well, and the next season and the season after that. So he's done good, but he's got to keep doing it. So but it was certainly good to see.
He's great to watch too. He's one of those players you just. It's not like it's effortless, but when he gets the ball and he seems to be able to read the play much better than most.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about his handballs is that it doesn't even look like he's putting much weight behind his swing, but they take off from his hand. It's like they accelerate midair. It's uncanny.
It's the important thing about, I think, any player, and it's certainly going to be more the case with a player that's been developed for a long time at a lower level, which is that they maximise their physical ability before they start learning what their limitations are at AFL level. So you'll have young guys come in and they'll play very well immediately, but they'll always have to fight for the rest of their career the limitations that they learn at AFL level that they learned as a rookie. Whereas Brendan Archie, he's had time to develop, he's had time to just become extremely good at a lower level, and now he's at AFL level. He's learning what the limits of his ability are, but he's actually been extremely well developed before this point, so he's not having to overcome his mental hiccups about, oh, I can only hand pass this far, I can only kick this far, I can only be this fast. He's had that huge amount of physical development, and so coming into AFL for him, as late as he has become, okay, this is now the benchmark I'm setting now, not when I set when I was 18 and couldn't do as much stuff as I do now. So it makes it a bit easier, and I think we're seeing the benefit in terms of him becoming the player that he is, which is that he knows what he can do. And that's a hugely powerful thing, like in any field, not just football, but in any field like business, government, whatever else you want to mention, is knowing what you are capable of to an extreme degree. And I think that's really the advantage that Brendan Archie is carrying with him right now. And it's certainly one of the things he can really get through development at a lower level. So it's really great that we're seeing the benefits of that, and certainly that Brendan's seeing the benefits of that.
9 score involvements. It was just a great dual sort of inside-outside game, and I guess that's been one of his sort of criticisms over the last couple of years, is that he's very good inside, but he just can't find enough of the outside ball, and he's now able to do that at both SANFL level and it seems to be at AFL level as well. So really looking forward to seeing what he can do next year, and once Ollie Wines comes back into the side, and see what sort of role he's got.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Looking at who's going to come back into the side, like we've got Trengove, Carlisle, Ollie Wines, Jared Pollock. Oh my God! If we had a key forward, we'd be so excited right now.
That's it. Got an interesting tweet from Catherine McDonald, who said, just going back a little bit, could be interesting if the AFL gives us a New South Wales / Queensland style recruiting zone. Could keep some young talent that way. Is that something that you guys might see happening in the future? I know there's been a little bit of talk about the AFL giving sort of every club a bit of an academy that they can sort of recruit from.
I don't really have a problem with the New South Wales Queensland zones, because the tails of every draft are littered with players that have chosen between AFL and another sport. Like there's always, every year, there's multiple players that have chosen between like basketball or cricket or rugby or whatever else and AFL. And so I think that's really the important battle to win in Aussie rules in Sydney or I suppose New South Wales and Queensland, is just the choice of AFL over other codes. So, look, I think it's really good for Sydney. I think that we found that, certainly with Port Adelaide, that like the average AFL side has like 50% Victorians, 20% South Australians, 20% Western Australians, and 10% other. If you don't increase the other, then you're giving a huge advantage to Victoria, WA and SA. And so I've got no issue with Sydney and Queensland having access to the appropriate recruits, as long as they pay a fair price for them. And I think that the changes that come through as far as draft pick bidding, I think that's really appropriate. And I think that certainly should achieve the desired effect in terms of making sure that they have enough local guys that aren't just going to be like, I want to go back to Melbourne. That's really what it's all about, and developing the code locally as well. Like, was it McVeigh up in Sydney? Like, he's from Pennant Hills, up in Sydney Northwest, and that's really fantastic for them that he could have played his whole career there. I don't think he got it through the development list, but there's a few others that certainly have, and I've got no issue with them keeping that. But it would be nice to add academies to the other teams. The problem is that, like, it makes sense for Port Adelaide, for example. So you say, okay, Eyre Peninsula, we'll set up an academy there. And that, that's reasonable, because there's actually going to be a fair amount of logistics involved, a fair amount of money involved in developing that Eyre Peninsula zone. When it comes to Victoria, like, they're not going to be saying, oh, okay, we'll pick an equally remote area in Victoria to promote, because there isn't one in Victoria. Victoria's got a huge number, compared to other states, a huge number of significant population centres that are still near a capital city. And so that means that if you try to apply that to Victoria, you're going to say, oh, okay, we're going to develop Albury-Wodonga, which doesn't need development. It's already got the Murray Bushrangers. They're a fantastic team, and they produce talent every year, some of which is on our list. I can't see that there should be any advantage to Victorian teams suddenly developing that talent. So unless there is a requirement that Victorian teams also develop distant talent. So, for example, if they had to develop South Tasmania or the South Island of New Zealand, or somewhere in the middle of North and Western Australia and Northern Territory, then I don't think it's going to be a reasonably comparable thing to what Sydney and GWS are doing in terms of developing out in Wagga, or not Wagga, it's further out than that, West Wyalong or wherever else. And I think that's going to be the issue, is the same as it was for the VFL and the SANFL and the Waffle, when they had development zones, recruiting zones, is making sure that they are fair and that they're not advantageous to some clubs over others. So I think that's going to be the huge battleground coming up. I think that they can prove that they're going to work as hard as the New South Wales and Queensland clubs, but I don't think the Victorian clubs can prove that unless they go outside the state.
Well said.
There's not much more to say. I'll tell you what, it'll be nice. It would be nice if the AFL gave us a recruiting zone that sat over the top of the zones that the SANFL took away from us.
Look, that would be the best thing ever. And I think, but most importantly, I think that not only is there that cultural connection to the area, but there's also the fact that it's still a really big area. Like, it's a huge geography with not a lot of high population centres. I don't think it's an unreasonable request to make. And I think it's better for the state, and it's better for football, and it's better for football in the state for us to have access to that area.
I think it's also been one of the cornerstones of the Port Adelaide Football Club's culture is really focusing hard on their development zones and their recruiting zones. Yep. They've traditionally done it very well, much better than their contemporaries. And I think it'd be a great idea if we got something like that. I agree with you though, Portia. It's hard to work out, well, how is that equalised around the league?
Because it's easy to do in Western Australia too, as well. You just say Geraldton and Broome, pretty much, and say areas around that. Yeah, sure, West Coast Freo, go for it. And obviously in Queensland, Queensland, you've got so many opportunities for sort of remote areas where AFL is nothing, to sort of say, here, develop these areas. But as soon as it comes to the Melbourne clubs, it's just too easy in Victoria, really.
That's it. Well, moving on, and let's get back to the game, and we'll talk about a player who was involved in probably the two biggest stories of the night, and obviously that's Chaddy Wingard, and we'll split it up into two parts and talk about his on-field exploits first. It was probably billed as the battle of the small forwards. It was the Chad versus Cyril show. Many in the media sort of mentioning that this might determine who would get an All-Australian spot. Look, it was pretty much Chad hands down. There was a player that relied on cheap kicks over the top, skulking at the back to get his touches, and then there was a player who, when the heat was on, he really turned the game in our favour with a brilliant half of football, and that player was Chaddy Wingard, and there's no doubt he's the best small forward in the game at the moment, to be honest, and he should really be talked of as probably a top 5 player across the whole competition as well.
I think it's best summed up by a phrase in classic big footyese, which is, what's a Cyril? I am 12. Realistically, there was just no competition between the two on the day. Yeah, it's just Wingard came out and showed that he's not just a fantastic half forward, but he's a potential Brownlow winner, All-Australian. He's a Hall of Fame potential candidate at this point, and Cyril is just a really good small forward. That's just how big the difference is between the two at this point, and I think that we saw that on the weekend.
It's pretty much the difference between John O'Brien and Warren Treadray and Nick Rewalt and all them, to be honest.
Well, except it's more obvious because it was very easy for people to go, oh, Warren Treadray made a telephone sign with his hand. He's evil. Let's just discount him forever.
Oh, but Chad's arrogant. Haven't you read?
Chad.
I know that Chad's arrogant. Oh, no. That's just so awful. How can we live with ourselves as sports supporters?
A professional footballer being arrogant. My God.
Oh, unbelievable.
Every game I go to from now on, I'm just going to see Chad Wingard and I'm going to go, I wish he wasn't so arrogant.
I loved seeing him read the taps of Ryder's taps at the bounce-ups. He was just as good as Robbie Gray, I think. He would weave his way through the congestion, collect the ball and spin around and kick it forward. He's amazing to watch, an amazing player. I think I loved his attitude towards Hodgie after the bump.
Yeah.
the unintentional bump, mind you, the reckless or whatever they call it, careless bump, going up and getting into his face and just letting him know that didn't affect me. I thought that was brilliant to see.
Yeah,
I was kind of
that portrayed the real old school Port Adelaide spirit. I thought that if you want to get me, you better knock me out because otherwise I'm going to kick your ass. Sort of
yeah, that's very true. Well, it was I think it was. I've said it before. I think, but Darren Smith had the reputation for if you hit him, he's going to kill you. That's pretty much the way he played. Like some games, you say, "Oh, Darren Smith is okay," but as soon as someone smacked him across the face or in the back of the head, he was on fire, and he would just make them pay the whole game long. I think that's what we saw with Chad Wingard. The only thing I suppose that surprised me is that the MRP not only gave Hodge only 2 each, which is ridiculous, but that they didn't also say, "Hey, Chad, why are you putting yourself in your position? You should get a week penalty as well."
That's it. Well, let's talk about that moment, the Luke Hodge moment. He lined him up, the ball was dead, a free kick was paid. You saw on his face, he knew he could get him, he lined him up, and he just went for it. And I honestly don't believe he meant to get him solely in the head so that it squished against the point post and nearly made him a paraplegic. But I do absolutely believe it was intentional, that he was hoping to get body on body and squash him against the post and make him wind him or break a rib or something like that. And he misjudged, got him in the head, and somehow only got 2 weeks.
I know. I mean, on the Byron Pickett, James Beagley scale, that is just a travesty, quite honestly. He should be at least missing the first final. The fact that he's missing 2 dead rubbers is just absolutely an insult to the game and an insult to everyone that's ever been suspended, quite frankly. But here's the thing. In 10 years' time, they'll be having Luke Hodge on the Channel 7 commentary team, and everyone will forget everything about what they did with Alistair Lynch when he had that big old slugfest against Darryl Wakeland in the 2004 Grand Final. Or when he took drugs for however many years. No one thinks about it. They don't care. They're like, oh, Alistair Lynch, he's a good bloke, isn't he? Played for Fitzroy. Oh, what a great bloke he is. And that's what they'll be doing about Luke Hodge in 10 years. So, as much as it shits us off right now, and we'll remember it for a long time, no one else will. So we're just going to say, 2 weeks. And let's just try and beat him on the field, because it's not going to work off field, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to say that's one of the worst things I've seen on a footy field in recent memory. Like, it was the way he lined him up, and you could tell by his body motion that he intended to hit him and to hurt him. He may not have intended to, but bend his neck around the post, but that is actually what happened.
That's what happened.
I am actually blown away that the match review panel didn't take that into consideration. Like, it's that the potential for death or paralysis from something like that is there. It's like, it's not even debatable. You cannot bend your neck at right angles at such speed with such force without the potential for massive injury.
But he's a good bloke. He's a good bloke, and he probably loves a beer, and he probably gives kittens to little kids or something.
Channel 7, and there's all of those things.
And Brad Sewell's on the match review panel, so they're best mates.
Are you joking?
What the hell? That's insane.
It's ridiculous.
But that's the thing, like in any industry, and admittedly, AFL has more lax rules than any industry for good reasons. But I mean, I think there's a certain point at which you go past like what is reasonable physical contact and into what is criminal, and that's pretty bloody close to it. I mean, at the very least, that's an IHS incident. There should be shitloads of reports coming up like, how do you think that you can do this? What makes you think that you can act like this? That's just really total. It's the most disgusting act I think we would have seen on the footy field this year. Certainly for a few years, and certainly against the Port Adelaide player.
Well, Luke Hodge has probably had the 2 worst acts on field this year. I mean, his deliberate elbow to the face of Andrew Swallow, and now this. And I've got no doubt if the shoe was on the other foot and it was Wingard who did that to Hodge, he'd be getting more than 2 weeks.
Well, yeah,
The records.
He'd end up with 3 or 4.
But there's multiple things affecting that. Like, there's the Luke Hodge factor, there's the Victorian factor, there's the he's a good bloke factor versus Chad Wingard's fact that he's from outside Victoria, he's Aboriginal, and that he is also a good bloke, but people can write him off as arrogant because he does the same things any other good player does. He'd definitely get absolutely smashed. absolutely, by the tribunal. It's really unfair, but it's what would definitely happen. So I don't think there's any argument about that at all.
Well, the example someone posted up of the Hamish Hartlett's little tummy punch to Hill and Kane Corns' pushed on Mitchell, and they got games. They got 1 and 2 games, and you think, how is that even comparable? I don't understand how it's comparable. It's they're leagues apart.
Jonas got 3 weeks for his
concerned.
bump on Robertson a few years ago. He got 3 weeks. He got more than that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
And that, if I remember rightly, that one with Jonas, that was because part of the deliberation was because it happened after the whistle was blown.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happened in the Hodge Wingard incident.
Exactly. You're dead right.
Not that I want to really go back in time, but I've no doubt that Jonas got suspended for 3 weeks for that because of that interview that happened at half-time where Robertson had no idea where he was. If that didn't happen, he wouldn't have got 3 weeks. Because that was such a bad look for the AFL. He's a guy clearly concussed. He's got no idea who he's talking to, where he is, and he's been allowed to go back on the field. Jonas suffered because of that.
Yeah.
But how is the slow motion replays of Hodge with the devil look? The devil
and
eyes.
you can tell as soon as he hits him, he has this look of, oh shit, what have I done? He knew he was in trouble the moment that it happened.
The worst thing for me was because Wingard had he was almost moving away from the point post, so his motion was going the opposite direction. Hodge caught his head, so his body was moving one way and his head was moving the other. That is just, I mean, when you saw his head, the top of his head on the front of the point post, and you realised that his neck was at right angles.
Yeah,
that was scary stuff.
Yeah, it's so dangerous. Yeah,
I think at a certain point you need to look at the tribunal having a ruling like you don't play again till he does, because the only way that Hodge could have got more weeks would have required that Chad Wingard have probably at least 3 times as many weeks off with injury, recovering from the head injury that he would have had to have suffered. It's just hugely irresponsible, the AFL, to only punish it to the degree they have. And even if you allow for the fact that they always have more lax punishment during finals, the fact that it wasn't even a final miss is just disgusting, and they're not following their duty of care towards their players. It's quite clear on that. They're happy to affect a sling tackle that does no harm and give someone a week, but when someone does something that could literally put someone in a wheelchair, 2 weeks, piss off. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, let's move on and talk about the defence, and in particular the small defenders, because I thought they had just about the games of their lives on the weekend. And Luke Bruce has been held goalless just 4 times in his last 58 matches. 3 of those are against Port Adelaide. And Cam O'Shea did a brilliant job on him, and it was one of our top players, and it was one of the best performances in his career, I thought.
Yep. Yeah, keep going.
He's probably had better games, but the thing I like about Cam O'Shea is that he's almost he's the reverse flat track bully, where he seems to play incredibly well when there's everything on the line or against big opponents. He's been one of our best players in the finals in the last couple of years. He's had massive games in showdowns, important come from behind wins, and he just seems to relish the chance to play against good opposition.
I think it's also the fact that good opposition brings out the best in our team generally. So you take every single one of our defenders, and the times they've looked the most shit is when the entire team is performing badly and they've just been on the bad end of it. And I think that O'Shea has certainly suffered from that. And I think that going back a little bit, Michael Pettigrew suffered from that as well, which is that if people up the field aren't following team rules, it's very hard for any defender that has anything other than a strictly one-on-one job, which is going to be pretty much the centre-half back and the full-back. It's really hard for them to look like they know what they're doing because they're playing a certain way, and if the people up the ground are not controlling their men or they're not providing options for them to kick to or whatever else, then they're going to look like muppets regardless, because the ball is always going to come to defenders. Whereas with half forwards, when they have a bad game, all that happens is you just don't see them. Whereas defenders are forced into positions where they have terrible games. And I think that's not just an O'Shea thing, that's a Pittard thing, that's a Broadbent thing, that's a Homsch thing, that's an everyone thing. any defender in the Port Adelaide side, if our entire team is not on their game, they're going to look a bit shit. Unless they're doing a strictly one-on-one job, which I suppose is why we have such high reputation for Trengove and Carlisle, because they do get the luxury of doing that reasonably often. Their other players are also required to create a bit more as well. So I think that's really... I think that explains O'Shea's form. I think it explains Jonas's form. It's certainly what he said in his interview during the week. And I think that's basically what we'll see going forward as well, which is that... if Port are playing well, our defence will look like they're really solid, and we won't, at a certain point, if we play well consistently enough, for long enough, we won't even think about the defence anymore. And that's what should be happening with a really good premiership side, where you just go, now the defence were really good. Because they're doing enough, they're getting enough support up the field that they can do what they do, and then therefore they're able to provide the feeding of the ball to the midfield and the half forwards and the repelling action that is required for the slingshot game plan that we employ under Ken Hinkley. So I think what we're really seeing is the defence is looking better or defenders are looking better because our team is looking better, and O'Shea is just a really obvious symptom of that, like a canary down a mine, pretty much.
That's it. You mentioned Pittard, and I thought he was one of our best on ground, and Popolo did nothing, and he controlled the back line really well, and that was one of his best performances of the year, and back to his best from the sort of first 4 or 5 weeks when he was absolutely killing it out there.
Yeah,
I love Pittard's game. I thought he was great. Just really he's still not shy of taking things on, even like it would be very easy for a player like him to retreat into his shell and just start to be ultra defensive and not creative, but to continue to try things and take the game on, I think speaks a lot about his character and also about Ken's the way Ken works with him and the way Ken coaches him.
I think that also there's one thing, it wasn't exactly the same motion, but there's one thing I always remember about Josh Carr playing, which is that if he had the ball, say, in half-back or on the wing or something like that, and no one was coming towards him, he'd just stop moving, and he'd draw a person towards him. And Pittard doesn't do that, but like we definitely saw at one point where Pittard was, I suppose, around centre wing area, and he ran a full circle, like a 20-metre diameter circle.
I remember that.
Because no one was really coming near him. And so, well, if you're not going to come near me, I'm just going to keep running around with this ball. Fuck all of you. And I think that sort of portrayed the same attitude we used to see with Josh Carr, which is like, well, if you're not going to come and run at me, I'm just going to hang with this ball for as long as I want. And that's great, because what that does is that draws a man, and when you draw a man, it means that there's more opportunities upfield to get the ball to the guy you want to. And so that was really, I think, a thing that was really noticeable about Pittard's game. Some fans, I think, when they see someone run in a circle, they go, oh, what are you doing? Just kick the bloody thing. Well, they're idiots, because that's exactly the thing you should do when you've got a flutter defence you're going up against and you want to say, hey, come at me, otherwise I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want in midfield. Particularly when you're in the lead and you're holding a lead. It's like, hey, we've got the lead, you're going to have to work for it. So that's the smart thing to do. Pittard did the smart thing. Like I said, some idiots probably thought it was a dumb thing, but it was just really exactly what should have been done in the circumstances, and it's really great to see that back in the side as well.
Yep. And look, Cracker as well. I mean, he did a really good job on Cyril, and Cyril might have kicked 2 goals and had a couple of goal assists, but I didn't really think he controlled the game much at all. And I thought Crack had some really important one-on-one wins, which was pretty important at the time. And even Brody, I thought Brody had a pretty good game as well. So it was really a wonderful performance from all the defenders. Especially as you mentioned, with Trengove and Carlisle out of the side. And do you think David Hale being a late exclusion really played into our hands? Because as we mentioned in the preview, maybe it was looking like they were going in a bit tall and we might be stretched a bit, but it really played into our hands, I thought.
I think it played into our hands in 2 areas. Obviously, it played into our hands in terms of not having to man him up as a resting forward, but it also obviously played into our hands in that Ryder didn't need lobby around.
Yeah.
I think that was really the big difference in that Ryder against McAvoy. I mean, McAvoy I haven't rated at any point in his career, quite honestly, which is probably a bit unfair, but...
no, he's ordinary.
If it had been McAvoy and Hale, I mean, Hale, as much as he looks like a giant accountant, he's still a good ruckman. And I think that he's McAvoy probably a good enough team to beat Ryder over the whole game. So it certainly did play to our advantage, I think, absolutely.
I like how he went bold, and then he obviously went on advanced hair and got some hair back, and then he thought, nah, stuff it, this is too much work, I'm going to be bold again. That takes a lot of class, I think.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they really need Brent Geary around as a hair coach, as a former player.
Yeah, that's it. The only other player I want to mention is Hammer, who had another great game. He's had a pretty consistent season. Just another really mature performance, 26 touches and a goal, and he did a lot of great work in the midfield as well.
Yeah, look, he was really good. I guess if I was picking out the players that were the best on Friday, he probably wouldn't be in the top 7 or so. But there's no doubt that he had a really solid contribution for us. And I think the fact that he sort of is playing, dare I say it, he's playing a little bit more of that Steven Salopek style role behind the centre square. He's actually quite good at it, and it's really, for someone with his kicking skill, in terms of length and also reasonable accuracy, it's not really surprising to see him there. I would like to see him convert to more like an early Stuart Drew sort of role where he actually kicks a few goals occasionally, and he's done that a few times this year. But if you're looking for a smart guy to play between centre square and the defensive 50 and be able to get the ball and put it to somewhere that's dangerous, then you can't really go much better from our current squad than Hamish Hartlett, and he's certainly proven this on the weekend, I think. He's just been really useful to us as a tactical asset. He's not going to win Brownlow votes doing the game he's been playing this year, but who gives a stuff? Because if the team's winning games, then we don't really give a shit.
Yeah, I don't think he cares. I think his entries into the forward 50 are just so precise. Yeah. His kicking is beautiful to watch. That one where Sean Burgoyne almost tackled him, but he still got the kick out, and it's what led to the Wingard Hodge bump. It was really well placed. And he was under pressure. He knew he was under pressure, but he still got the kick away and still had the accuracy. I love watching him do that run and kick on the run. Great. He's a great player. Great player to watch.
Yeah, and I think that also the benefit of him playing that role is that it might actually add to his durability, same as it did for, I suppose, Peter Burgoyne when he was playing back pocket. In that the fact that he's playing half back, that probably means there's a slightly less physical contesting, which we know that Hamish is injury prone, his older brother's injury prone. And so if we can put him in a position where he sort of can play kind of outside and just intercept and pick up the ball and just be really damaging with his disposal, I think it'll add to his longevity and obviously it'll add to the value to the Port Adelaide side. So I'm really happy with him in that role.
Has he played every game this year? I think he has. Yeah,
pretty sure he has. Yeah.
So that'd be a first time, and that's probably in no small part to the fact that he's playing this kind of role. And so that's great. If he's useful strategically to the side, if he's managed to avoid injury and we're winning games, why would you change things? And if he's happy playing the role, which hopefully he is, but hopefully he's happy playing that role, then I see no reason to change what he's doing. It's a really fantastic asset to the Port Adelaide side. It's really great for Ken Hinkley to have as a thing that opposition sides have to watch out for and account for. We might see him starting to cop the old half-forward tag in future, which we have ourselves deployed, obviously, with great effect in the past. But we'll see how it goes. And I think the Hamish Hartlett has got enough aggro and enough sense to be able to get around most guys that they might use the half-forward tag.
Yeah. He's a bit of an enforcer too. I like that about him.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have a few of those. But as I said earlier, I think in this podcast, he's got is he from West Adelaide? West Adelaide, yeah. He's got to not get caught up in the West Adelaide bullshit. He's got to, be a bit tough, but still focus on winning the game. And I think he's certainly walking that line pretty well. So.
Cheer the black and the white. Honour the Magpies day and by night. Live that.
Well, moving on and talking about the SANFL, the Maggies continued their great run of form. They won 4 wins on the trot now. They defeated South at Alberton 14 goals 10 to 9 goals 9. Andrew Moore, Paul Stewart and Carl Amon kicked 3 goals each, whilst Jared Redden also kicked 2 as well. I guess the good news is that it pretty much ensures the double chance outside of 2 unlikely results. I think Nor would have to win by over 100 and we have to lose by over 100 to miss out. So that's a minor bonus, I guess, leading into the finals.
How are we feeling about Jared Redden staying on the list? I'm not saying we should delist him, but obviously his injury concerns in the past have been obviously an issue, and we don't have a huge number of ruckmen But are we still pretty happy for him to hang around for another year?
Look, Frampton, I don't think is ready, so I'm more than happy for Jared Redden to stay around for another season.
And what about Moore and Stewart? Well, kicking 3 goals each. I think they're both pretty high on most people's list of to be delisted. Do you think that's sort of, is it too little too late, or is it enough to sort of keep them around a bit longer as well?
There's no doubt that Stewart's gone. I think that's 100% locked in. He'll get delisted and redrafted as a rookie so that we don't have to pay out his contract. And look, he provides great depth as well. Andrew Moore, I think it is probably too little too late. He's always been a very good SANFL player. Just hasn't been able to raise that game at AFL level. And he was probably best on ground. 22 touches, he had 6 clearances, 4 inside 50s and 3 goals. So yeah, he had a wonderful game. But I would think considering he's uncontracted, I think he'll be out the door as well.
Yeah, it's a pity because he's got the physique to be a really good player, but I just don't think he's a smart footballer. He's as you said, Macca, he can play well in the SANFL and seems to dominate every now and then, but he looks lost at AFL level. And I say that as somebody who's been a fan of his for a couple of years. I wanted to see him succeed because I thought he had the tools and he's got the physique to be a very handy player. But yeah, he's been disappointing. I find him more disappointing than John Butcher.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, he was listed. I guess he was drafted as that, Ryan O'Keefe sort of clone when Ryan O'Keefe was all the craze. And yeah, I mean, I think I've said before, either on the forums or on the podcast, that I like the idea of Andrew more than I actually like Andrew Moore. Seems to have all the tools, and he's that sort of player type that you really want to do well, and if he does succeed at AFL level, he's going to be this goal-kicking monster, big body, can win clearances, kick goals, get heaps of the ball outside, and he just hasn't looked the part at all. Brendan Archie's come in and done that job the last 2 weeks, and
Precisely.
His last 2 weeks have been better than any game that Andrew Moore's played at AFL level.
I've got to say that when we drafted Andrew Moore, I suppose it's a thing that's happened over my time on Big Footy, and I guess everyone else's as well, is learning a lot about the game. And so I remember back in the years when I think Riley Dunn was kicking around and Fremantle picked him at around pick 10. The only thing he was really known for at junior level was being a utility. And the fact that he sort of didn't do much after that sort of told me, you don't use a first-round pick on a utility, but that's exactly what we did with Andrew Moore, and unfortunately it's come to much the same result as it did with Riley Dunn, which is that the reason, typically, why you're a utility at junior level is because no one thinks that you're important enough to play in an important position in the top side. So it might be that you look really good in that role, but that it might be that there are some things missing from your game. So, for example, you might be missing a degree of fitness, you might be missing a degree of skill, most likely, or you might be missing the fact that you're not a good contested mark or something like that, but you're good enough to keep around the place and use as a tool. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of those players that really work out. Ryan O'Keefe would be an exception, no doubt, and that's probably what makes him valuable. And there's certainly others that have been drafted, but most of the time when they have been drafted, most of the guys that you say are, I suppose, pure utilities, they've mostly been drafted in the 3rd round or later, or even on the rookie list, because they've had to do a lot of development standard. I think Andrew Moore's really proven the fact that guys that are just utilities, you really don't want to draft them in the 1st round, and hopefully we don't do it again. Yeah.
Well, yes, 3 first-round draft picks in 2009, and the best of the lot looks to be Jasper Pittard, who half the people hate at Port Adelaide. So it's a great way to sort of blow 3 first-round draft picks, I would think.
Can I have my little brag where I said that we should draft John Butcher, Daniel Taylor, and Jake Carlisle in 2009?
Yeah, you can have your humble brag. That's all right. Yeah, look, as we've said, and I know Tribey said it on the podcast as well, I mean, Butcher and Talia just look like the absolute lay-down, 100%, got to do it, 2 bookends, would have been great, and even though Butcher hasn't worked out, he was still always going to be drafted. It was still the right pick to make at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think I was happy to draft Andrew Moore with pick 16, but I think I wanted Luke Tapscott, so I should probably shut my mouth as well. So.
Yeah, definitely. You're sort of always going to be like a poor man's Brock McLean.
Yeah, that's exactly what he turned out to be as well.
Yeah.
So I guess the other thing to note maybe from that game was Sammy Cahoon was one of the best on ground as well. He had 25 touches, 10 marks, a few clearances and a couple of behinds. He played a really good game, and pretty interested to see how he goes next year. As we've said, maybe Andrew Moore might be gone, maybe Aaron Young as well. There's going to be spots where he moves up the depth ladder, I guess, and might be maybe first in, first out, I guess, next year.
So the second half of the last 5 games maybe, well, less than that, we've seen us playing a different style. So earlier in the year on the podcast, I definitely said that we were playing in a versional style of game where our preference would be to go to the outside, go to the wings and avoid the physical contest. We're playing a game style that is much more about coming as close to the physical contest as possible to draw the man and provide more options upfield. And I don't think the Cahoon fits into that style of game plan at all. He's small, he's light, he's reasonably fast, not particularly. He's great for an outside grinder, but I don't think that if we're going to play that sort of more contested style of football, more attacking style of football, I don't think there's a place for Cahoon in that style of side. I think he's probably better off being at another club. I'm not sure if he'd have the value for a trade. I don't think he does, but I don't necessarily see, unless we have a huge reversion to being a sort of an outside sea-gully side, I don't see any real future for Sam Cahoon at Port Adelaide. And I know it might be an unfair call in some respects, but I really feel that very strongly.
I think he'll be given every chance to succeed. I think he'll be given every chance, and I think there's definite, negatives to his game, which he probably needs to work on. But I guess a lot of people have said he might turn into that sort of Kane Corns replacement as a tagger, but I don't really see that as I don't think he's good enough inside or has the toughness to do that. But exactly. I don't know. I think there might be a spot for him at AFL level. It's just a matter of finding his niche, I guess.
I think he's another one that seems lost out there. He doesn't seem to know where he's at.
I don't know. I think he's improving in that regard. I think he's played some pretty good games at AFL level this year, and was maybe a little bit unfair to be dropped when he got dropped. And he is coming first year off a knee reconstruction. He is still pretty young. I think he's only 20 years old, so he's still got time on his side. And if it's someone that gets a lot of the ball, you can always do with more sort of ball magnets like that. And at the very least, he's going to be good depth.
I think that the main difference between Cahoon and someone like, I suppose, an Archie or over at North Melbourne or Brent Harvey is the fact that they are both physical guys, and Cahoon is definitely not that player. If you're looking for small guys that have a long-term impact, they're either extremely fast or they're surprisingly strong and a strong mark for their height, and Cahoon is neither of those.
Yep, that's a good call. That's fair enough.
Sorry.
I can't disagree with that.
That porno moustache and hair just doesn't do it.
Well, the porno moustache is a huge asset. I have to say, there's one thing about Jasper Pittard, which Rick was not going to be too happy about, but I can't figure out what his ideal hairstyle should be, because he always looks like a guy that sort of does, garage pornography in his spare time. Like he has a little moustache or something like that. Now he's got the long hair, and it's like, I just know what he should do, but certainly.
I did like the headband look that Jasper was rocking earlier in the year.
Yeah. Headband helps a little bit, but then he looks like he's trying to be Pat Cash then. But yeah.
That's it. Well, Carl Amon kicked 3 goals as well. I'm interested to see what he can do next year. Maybe he might sneak in another game before the end of the season at AFL level. Not sure there, but. Matty Lobe also had a pretty good game. He had 34 hit-outs, 12 touches, a bunch of clearances as well. So, I don't know, we might see him come back into the side too.
I think that with Lobe, the rumours are going around that he's got any kind of injury at all. Like, send him off. Get him his surgeries, get him his recuperation or anything else, because even if he does come back, we don't really need him to come back at this point. So, if he's playing in the SANFL, I suppose, next week, then we know it's not an injury, in my view. Because if it's an injury, he should just be not bothering to play at this point.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what happens if, come finals time for the SANFL, whether he qualifies or what have you. If he plays the next game at SANFL level, he's played 3 in a row. Maybe he does qualify in that regard. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I suppose that could be a thing.
I think if he's not going to play SANFL finals, he should probably go off now and have a rest, I would think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that...
Go and have a good lie down.
Exactly.
Have a few steaks. I don't think there's a lot of times that I'd say that, you might do something for the sake of the Magpies, but I guess this is probably one of the really corner cases where you might consider it, in that we don't need Lobby for the rest of the year for the power. He could be resting, but he might as well be playing ruck for the Magpies, so why not keep him in there and get him in finals qualified if he can be, and just a run with the Magpies and hopefully, jag a premiership at that level. Why not? And I suppose it's also useful for him to be hitting to the midfielders of tomorrow. I suppose they'll get used to his style. But yeah, if he's injured, like if he's getting injections every game, then he should definitely not be playing.
Yeah. No doubt. All right, well, I think that's it for tonight. We've gone a little bit over time, but that's all right. Thanks for coming back on.
No worries.
I could keep talking for another hour.
Would be very easy to do, I think.
Yeah. Can I just say, I know that Rick's coming back in a couple of weeks apparently, but I'd just like to point out the fact that as a co-host, I have a 100% winning record. So, do that at your risk.
This is true. Sorry, Rick, you're on the sidelines, I think. You're Matthew Loby to Portia's Patrick Ryder.
Yes, I agree with that totally. I'm the camo shade of his Jasper Pittard.
All right, on that note, Calm Port Adelaide.
Go Power.
Power, and Calm the Magpies, I guess, as well, but mostly Calm the Power.
See you later.
Gets the ball across towards a teammate. Rick's hand pass, though, slapped, and now Need's away. Everything falling into place. Need, the beneficiary, running down towards the 50. Lines up. Bacon goal square. How about this? This is breathtaking.